Well, now how is it that they would even let out the fact that there's an underground military base at Denver? The first time I ever heard about it was a couple of years ago. We had this lady on named Hannah Billups, and she said that she was taken to an underground military base underneath that airport, and by the men in black that were trying to use her precognitive powers to elevate and to remote view, and they tried to turn her over to the dark side, and then she said there was a rescue attempt. But I mean, you're just actually kind of verifying. I mean, but I think the way that I understand the information is released about Obama going to this place is supposedly that when the Russia and the United States have an agreement that if either one of them has a war game or goes to a DEFCON anything, 1, 2, 3, or 4, I suppose it's just one, they have to notify the other country. So I think the information is coming back through us because our government notified Russia, and then Russia let it out in their newspaper, and it came back to the people of the United States. Is that the way that you see how it happened, or did our government itself release that information?
Well, I know that it got released, and it's pretty much common knowledge, and it's been released in the mainstream media regarding him going to Denver. Mm-hmm. So you have multiple fronts of information where stuff gets leaked out. I have no doubt that there's probably some stuff that comes out of Russia and China. I mean, if you look at the Russia and, Russia Today particularly, and the reports that come out of the Chinese media, on their mainstream media, they're talking about the Second Sun, they're talking about Nibiru openly. They have broadcasts about UFOs and all kinds of things that we don't hear about here in the United States. It's just fascinating. And regarding the deep underground military bases, you had the testimony of Phil Schneider. He got took out. He was murdered because he was blowing the whistle regarding the Dulce Wars and the fight that he had with the Tall Grays when they were building the Dulce base. Never mind that. You've also got the whistleblower, there's so many whistleblowers, it's unbelievable. I mean, you've got the James Casbolt testimony, Michael Prince, James Casbolt is his alias, which is absolutely jaw-dropping stuff that just confirms this stuff. And one more thing, and then you've also got Branton. The Branton papers, he wrote a book, and I highly recommend that anybody here read anything they can get a hold of on Branton. Branton is like Fritz Springmeier. Fritz Springmeier blew the whistle on the Illuminati. He wrote, the Illuminati Mind Control Slaves book. He wrote the 13 Bloodlines of the Illuminati, which includes the DuPonts, the Kennedys, a big list of folks. And the reason why I bring up Branton is just recently I wrote that article, Alien Demon Breeding Facility, a long time ago, and coincidentally, I received a comment from an anonymous person. Now, I had quoted a little bit from a Branton paper, and again, I recommend you get the Dulce book. It's absolutely unbelievable because it talks about how the Ashtar Command is in bed with the reptilians, and this is something into the Palladians, the Galactic Federation Light, that it's been a conspiracy for over 15 years now, and they're all in bed together, working together to trick humanity. But I get a comment that comes in from my old website, tribulation-now.com, and the anonymous poster says, I know where Branton is because Branton is my brother. His name is Bruce Allen Walton, and he's in the Utah State Prison. So I go to the Utah Department of Corrections. I type in Bruce Allen Walton, and up comes this guy's picture. So this guy Branton is the real deal, and he has so much information that he's leaked. A lot of these guys that leaked this information, they were contractors that were working for the Black Ops that were brought into these bases to work, and when they saw what was going on down there, they freaked out, and they made a run for it, and then they started writing papers and under aliases and getting the information out, and it's the real deal.
Zen Garcia, we're talking about, and John the Baptist sent those audio clips about a carnivorous, kind of a feeding frenzy, a carnivorous feeding frenzy there of the aliens. And we did have James Casbolt on this program, and on that program he said that he was on a ship where containers full, 10 by 10 containers full of body parts, small bone fragments, maybe tissue or whatever. He said that was the remainder exactly as those audios described of a feeding frenzy of aliens, and because they get the taste and they just start going at it, start ripping flesh, and then they have the leftovers, which the Navy puts into these containers and takes them out to sea. Are you familiar with this activity, and do you know where it's taking place, where these aliens are having these humanoid feeding frenzies?
Well, I'm going to go to the Word to answer your question. This is Micah chapter 3, and it says this. And I said, Hear, I pray you, O heads of Jacob, and ye princes of the house of Israel. Is it not for you to know judgment, who hate the good and love the evil, who pluck off their skin from off of them, and their flesh from off their bones, who also eat the flesh of my people, and flay their skin from off them, and they break their bones and chop them in pieces, as for the pot, and as flesh within the cauldron. Then shall they cry unto the Lord, but he will not hear them. He will even hide his face from them at that time, as they have behaved themselves ill in their doings. And we know that it all goes back to Genesis chapter 3:15, where the Lord told us that there was going to be enmity between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent. In that, he also cursed the serpent, and he said that the serpent would feed off of the dust of the earth. Is not Adam's body made of the dust of the earth? Do not the reptilians and their hybrid children, the giants, do not they drink the blood of humanity and eat the flesh of humanity and have even prior to the flood? Isn't that the whole reason why the Lord had to bring the flood on the planet to begin with, was to regenerate and repopulate the planet with the pure seed, the pure generational seed of Noah and his family? And the reason he made a covenant with them to not eat the flesh that had the blood within it was to serve as a condemnation against the fallen angels and their giant children and what they did prior to the flood and what they are doing now, because we are at that point where we're as in the days of Noah. As in the days of Noah. I want to read something real quick, Daniel. This is a passage from Berosus that talks about the situation on the planet right before the flood. Because if you don't understand what the Lord is saying in Matthew 24 about as in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the days of the second coming of the Son of Man, then you'll completely miss that it's tied to Genesis 6 and Genesis 3:15. And it says this, There was a time in which there existed nothing but darkness and an abyss of waters, wherein resided most hideous beings, which were produced of a twofold principle. There appeared men, some of whom were furnished with 2 wings, others with 4, and with 2 faces. They had one body, but 2 heads, the one that of a man, the other of a woman, and likewise in their several organs, both male and female. Other human figures were to be seen with the legs and horns of goats. Some had horses' feet, while others united the hindquarters of a horse with the body of a man, resembling in the shape the hippocentaurs. Bulls likewise were bred there with the heads of men, and dogs with 4-fold bodies, terminated in their extremities with the tails of fishes. Horses also with the heads of dogs, men too and other animals with the heads and bodies of horses and the tails of fishes. In short, there were creatures in which were combined the limbs of every species of animal. In addition to these, fishes, reptiles, serpents, with other monstrous animals which assumed each other's shape and countenance, of all which were preserved delineations in the temple of Belus in Babylon. So this is talking about all these hybrid species and all these weird creatures. And
what the hell are you? What are you reading there, Zen?
This is from Berosus's account.
And what is the date? What is the origin of that? What year?
Oh, this was like 1st century CE. I mean, this was before the before even the Septuagint was put together.
Okay, so but that just sounded like the reading list of what's going on today and the testimony of people that are talking about, the alien human hybrids and eating right there. That adds credibility to James Casbolt and others in these audio clips we got of these aliens just ripping human flesh apart and eating and devouring. That reads almost like the script.
Precisely.
It's the real deal.
Confirmation.
And then
it's the real deal. It's the real deal. I mean, look at the Katy Perry E.T. video, for crying out loud. That's about having sex with a gray alien, and then at the very end you see her walking out with the bottom of her body like that of a deer. I mean, these are abominations that are being thrown in the face of our Heavenly Father. This is a provocation. This is intentional provocation. And then you have this movie, Paul, that goes out and tries to make it like, these little gray aliens are just a fuzzy bunch of fun friends. If you had any idea what these things do to people, it would absolutely blow your mind. I mean, the tip of the iceberg is the kind of stuff that James Casbolt is talking about. I've seen testimony where they had literally truckloads full of human babies that they were that they had harvested and they were taken off of the earth. The woodpecker crates where they have warehouses full of babies in these electrified crates that they're preparing for mind control, and they electrify them every so many seconds, and the babies start to cry all at the same time. We're talking about some really horrible stuff. You know what? Nibiru is on its way here. The Draconians are on their way here. The destruction of the earth is on its way here. Mm-hmm. And the trumpet judgments. I mean, look at it. Stan Deo, you played it on the last time when I was here on the show. Mm-hmm. Stan Deo mentioned that the rumblings in the Pentagon right now are that the Anunnaki or the Sumerian gods are returning. Mm-hmm. Never mind that he also testified or said on Coast to Coast AM that the Hopi Indians in the Second Mesa told him and his wife Holly that they're getting ready to go underground because of a major solar event. Mm-hmm. Okay, the first trumpet judgment, which kicks off the beginning of the Great Tribulation, and I argue also includes a UFO war, is the third of the trash. A third of the grass and a third of the trees burn, and then you've got a mountain falls. The wormwood is the third trumpet. Okay, the first verse in Revelation says, "And these things will shortly come to pass." The word "shortly" means in rapid fire succession. So when this stuff breaks loose, if it's going to happen anytime soon, when it happens, it's going to be bam, bam, bam. And the wormwood comet thing. Okay, it says that a star falls down. It's not clear that it actually impacts the earth necessarily, but turns the waters to wormwood, and it says it makes them bitter and makes men die and become sick. All right, bitter. Okay, the comet, supposedly the comet Elenin, similar to the comet Halley's comet back in 1910, everybody in the Earth freaked out because they were afraid because the scientists had figured out through light spectrum analysis and such that it had a hydrogen cyanide tail. And that was back in 1910, and it didn't even come anywhere close to Earth. And then they find out, and they know now, that this Elenin comet, should it continue to head this way, also has a hydrogen cyanide tail. And if we pass through the tail of that comet, supposedly toward the end of October, early part of November, never mind that November 9th, the emergency broadcast system is being taken over from the White House all the way down through all the radio stations by force to make some sort of a test, so they call it. Okay, but we're going to be supposedly passing through the tail of this Elenin, which has a hydrogen cyanide. And if you look in Wikipedia and you search on hydrogen cyanide, guess what it has? It has an almond bitter taste. All right, that matches the third trumpet judgment. So this stuff is getting pretty creepy real fast, and it's all meshing together.
Wow, and what needs to be mentioned here, of course, when we're talking about this event around the 27th with Obama supposedly going in an underground base, again, it's I don't know the veracity of that, but it's all over the net, and I suppose it's over there in Russia. But during 9/11, there was the NORAD was doing a war games, which happened to have a scenario of planes flying into building. So they were ordered to stand down on that day. So the importance of this is that coincidentally, this could be another one of those events where supposedly we're having a war game scenario, but something real happens and confuses everybody. Do you guys agree that could be the issue that could happen?
Amen, brother, man. Cheney is a shape-shifting reptilian freak just like George W. Bush and the whole bunch of them. And he was running that whole deal in NORAD, and he told the jets to stand down.
Mm-hmm.
The whole reason why that jet in Pennsylvania, the plane in Pennsylvania crashed was because it was blown out of the sky by an F-16 that didn't stand down from Cheney's orders. I don't know if he didn't get it or whatever, but that thing was blown out of the sky. There was no crater from that plane. That whole thing was a setup. I mean, Marvin Bush, the little brother of George W. Bush, running Securicom, 6 months earlier authorizing, an elevator. Come on. That whole thing is a total setup, and you're right. And then before the big earthquake down in Haiti that happened just a couple of years ago or so, I can't remember exactly when, but anyway, they had another exercise going on down at Southcom in Miami, and they were practicing for supposedly some type of an emergency in Haiti, and then wouldn't you know it, HAARP rings show up, and Haiti has a massive earthquake. So yeah, they coordinate this stuff. They practice.
Mm-hmm.
You find the same MO being repeated everywhere. I actually made a movie about that Cheney. It's called Cheney and the Traitorous Stand Down of 9/11. It's on YouTube for anybody that's interested. But it was the same MO over there in Los Angeles during the 7/7 bombings. There was, the same kind of test drills happening. And it's also funny that Rudy Giuliani was over there for that particular event too. They brought him in as a consultant. How funny, yeah, because Rudy Giuliani also mentioned on ABC News, and I made a movie about this. It's called Giuliani, September Criminal or 9/11 Hero, and the reason I made the movie is because he declares in a ABC report with Dan Rather that he was told by a guy named John at the Office of Emergency Management that the building was going to collapse and that it was going to come down around them. Mm-hmm. And yet him and his buddies were able to get themselves out of a 47-story building, and yet they didn't relay this information on to any of the emergency workers or the firefighters or the police officers that lost their lives in the buildings on that day. So in my mind, he's a murderer and he should be brought up on charges.
Yeah. And, we have this event going on now with Solandra, which is Obama gave $525 million to the solar company that, last year, and they went bankrupt this year. What people may not know about that is that loan that the Obama administration, I'm going to make a connection here, but that loan that the Obama administration gave to that solar company was renegotiated not too long ago. And in that renegotiation, they specifically said that in the event, some strange event, if Solandra, the solar company, would go bankrupt, that the private investors would get their money first and the taxpayers would get their money second. Well, of course, later, they went bankrupt as if they already knew that was going to happen. That was a protective deal. But now their information is coming out that they pressured some high-ranking general to change his story about that. And so, we have a corrupt government, and people need to be aware. They need to take action on theirself. And you guys mentioned it earlier too, and that is to research these things. 9/11 showed you that the government will project one event with, say, this NORAD false flag, these games they were playing, and then coincidentally that's what happened that day. So now we've got another event coming up. So whether or not something happens underneath September 27th, and supposedly if we go into DEFCON 1 and these things, just know that that there are things out there that may be underlying that they may have planned for us. And if it doesn't happen, fine, but don't ever give the government or any entity the benefit of the doubt thinking, oh, well, there's nothing to it. And we need to be ready at all times from what you guys are saying. But John Baptist, to you, I have that Stan Deyo clip, and for those that never heard it, why don't we go ahead and play this here?
Good idea.
A number of things that I've heard from people in the Pentagon, that the buzzword in the secret of secrets in the Pentagon is the Sumerian gods are returning, and that's what they're referring to as that whole area that Peter said.
Wow. Can you repeat that again, just in case anybody missed it? The buzzword
in the Pentagon, in the military circles that are in the know about the cover-up here, they kind of in whisper tones talk about the return of the Sumerian gods. and they're talking about the what we would call aliens or fallen angels returning into the Middle East, into Old Sumer area.
The Anunnaki.
Well, could be.
Under the other ancient names.
Do you think that has anything to do with war?
To a remote view, and they tried to turn her over to the dark side, and then she said there was a rescue attempt. But I mean, you're just actually kind of verifying. I mean, but I think the way that I understand the information is released about Obama going to this place is supposedly that when the Russia and the United States have an agreement that if either one of them has a war game or goes to a DEFCON anything, 1, 2, 3, or 4, I suppose just one, they have to notify the other country. So I think the information is coming back through us because our government notified Russia, and then Russia let it out in their newspaper, and it came back to the people of the United States. Is that the way that you see how it happened, or did our government itself release that information?
Well, I know that it got released, and it's pretty much common knowledge. Second Son, they're talking about Nibiru openly. They have, broadcasts about, UFOs and all kinds of things that we don't hear about here in the United States. It's just fascinating. And regarding the deep underground military bases, you had the testimony of Phil Schneider. He got took out. He was murdered because he was bludgeoned. It's been released in the mainstream media regarding him going to Denver. Mm-hmm. So you have multiple fronts of information where stuff gets leaked out. I have no doubt that there's probably some stuff that comes out of Russia and China. I mean, if you look at the Russia and Russia Today particularly, and the reports that come out of the Chinese media on their mainstream media, they're talking about this.
Well, now how is it that they would even let out the fact that there's an underground military base at Denver? The first time I ever heard about it was a couple of years ago. We had this lady on named Hannah Billups, and she said that she was taken to an underground military base underneath that airport, and by the men in black that were trying to use her precognitive powers to elevate and to